Okay, this is Algebra 1, test number 1, part 2 from our study guide. We are picking up at number 18, where they ask you to find the perimeter of the figure. Remember, when you're talking about perimeters, in this case triangles, since there's 3 sides, you're just going to add A plus B plus C. None of them are labeled because it doesn't matter which order you add things. But in this case, you're going to do 31 centimeters plus 18 centimeters plus 25 centimeters. And then when you add all of those numbers up, you do them, two things at a time. 31 and 18 is going to be 49, and then 49 centimeters added to 25. It's going to give you a perimeter of 74 centimeters. Same thing for number 15. You're looking for the perimeter. It doesn't tell you that this is a rectangle. It doesn't say find the perimeter of the rectangle, but the fact that we have these boxes on them right here means that's 90-degree angles. That's actually when you start having to prove this stuff when you get in the 10th grade and you take a geometry class, that's enough to prove that it is in fact a rectangle. But we're all smart enough in here to understand that that means this is 15 feet and this is 10 feet. So you can say in order to find a perimeter, you add all of those sides up. So just without having to write every step out, 15 and 15 is 30, plus 10 is going to be plus 20. So your perimeter for this one is going to be 50 feet. Number 20 says a car travels 497 miles in 8 hours. Find the unit rate. Talked about this the other day. Rate is a synonym of speed. So this is the easiest formula to remember. Don't have too much anxiety about it, though I already wrote the formulas on the board. There's one on the left board and there's one up on the front below the objective, and they'll be up there for you for tomorrow to use on your test. You're looking for rate, so you're looking for the one that says R equals D over T. And then you just got to make sure you plug them into the correct spot. So rate's the one you don't know. We're going to leave it as a variable R. We're going to plug in our distance. Distance is 497 miles. So on top, 497 miles. And then we're going to plug in on the bottom our T, or our time, which is 8 hours. That's our T. So look at your units before you ever do any multiplying or any dividing. Notice miles is over hours. So just check to make sure before you do any work, check to make sure you're on the right track. At the end, when we divide these, we're going to get miles per hour. Check mentally if that makes sense. Does it make sense for a rate or a speed to be miles per hour? Of course it does. So when you divide 497, it's going to come out to a nice even integer for us. 497, at least I thought it was. Comes out, I'm thinking of a different test I made earlier. 497 divided by 8 actually gives you 62.125, and again, it's miles per hour. But then look at what it says way at the very end. It says round to the nearest tenth if necessary. That means the decimal place, or the spot right after the decimal place, which is this one. So we only want to go one space past the decimal. You look to the number after that one to determine if we leave it as 1 or if we move up to 2. Remember, if the number were 5 or higher, that 1 would become a 2, but it is not, so our rate will stay at 62.1 miles per hour. And that was a lot of talking to get through that. Divide 497 by 8 and round to the nearest tenth. A cyclist travels at a speed. Remember what speed means. You got to memorize that tonight. Speed means rate. 12 miles per hour for 2.5 hours. Find the distance. So we're looking for D. That's the one we don't know. Again. Okay, so we're looking for distance. The other thing that we have is the actual 2.5 hours. We know that that's a time measurement. So we have a rate, and I'll just include that one, of 12 miles per hour. That's our rate. That's our speed. We're looking for, it says find distance. So you want the formula that starts with a D. Distance equals rate times time. So we don't know what our distance is. D equals. Our rate is 12 miles per hour times our hours is 2.5. So all you're doing is multiplying, and that's 2.5 hours. You're multiplying 12 times 2.5. 12 times 2 is 24, and then half of 12 is 6. So your distance is going to be 24 plus 6, which is 30. And then hours divided by hours is going to be 30 miles. The distance is 30 miles. Number 22 says an athlete runs a 900-meter course in 180 seconds. Find the average speed. There we go. That's rate. We're looking for rate. Round to the nearest tenth. We're looking for rate. We know 180 seconds is our time, and we know our 900 meters is our distance. So you're using a formula that says rate equals distance over time. Again, speed equals miles per hour. That's the easiest one to remember. So rate equals something over something. We're going to put our distance, which is 900 meters, over our time, which is 180 seconds. So I'm going to write SEC where you don't think that S is a 5. So 900, always check your units. Rate equals, it's going to be meters per second. Does that make sense to have a speed be meters per second or to be a distance over time? Yes. Most of us are not familiar using meters and stuff like that, but it is a distance measurement. It's not as familiar as miles per hour. Take 900 and divide it by 180. That's what that says. When you do that, you get a nice, neat, even integer, 5 meters per second. Number 23 says Sasha returned home from mowing lawns at 4:15 p.m. It took 1 hour to mow the first lawn. The second lawn took 1 hour. She took a 30-minute break between the two lawns. When did she begin? Okay, so this one isn't really using any formulas. This one's just working backwards. I think she got home at 4:15. This is when she got home. It said she took an hour to mow the second lawn. So this is going to be second lawn. If it took her an hour, that means she started at 3:15. That's 1 hour. Since she took a half-hour break in between, so her half-hour break, this is her break, was a half hour. If you take 15 minutes away from 3:15, you get to 3 o'clock, and you take another 15 minutes away in order for that half-hour break, and you're going to get to 2:45. That's when her break began. Then when you go one more time, now it's going to be the first lawn she did. The first lawn took her 1 hour. So she began an hour before 2:45. She began at 1:45. So it said, when did she begin mowing the first lawn? Right here. She began at 1:45. And again, there are several different ways you can set this up into a formula. There are several different equations you can make. But this, I'm always trying to show you the easiest, most simple way. Work backwards through this. And you'll come up with when she began. Okay, writing algebraic expressions for the phrase. This is very, very simple, very, very quick problems. Sum, you have to know what that word means. Sum is a mathematical clue that means add or plus. So it says the sum of b and 11, b plus 11 is your algebraic expression. We talked about algebraic expressions. Remember that all that means is a variable expression when you have a variable plugged in. The product, here's another one. That's a keyword, product. That means to multiply of g and 4. You can write that two different ways. G times 4. A better way to write it, though, would simply to write it as 4g. But both of those would be considered acceptable. Now, number 26, you have to kind of do two things. It says 4 times the sum of P of Q and P. You know what times means. That means to multiply. Notice that's two different words for multiply, product and times. And then sum, we looked at that one a second ago. Sum means to add. Now, there's no way, it doesn't matter what order you write this in, there's no way to get the sum of Q and P to add those two, Q and P. There's no way to get that first, because even if I write times 4 at the bottom or behind it, it's going to still, according to your order of operations, which we'll start talking about next week, it's still going to do the multiplying of P and 4 first. The only way to make this work is to put a parenthesis around Q and P. Now it's the sum of those two. And then you'll say 4 times that. The neatest way is to simply write 4 right up front. 4 times the sum, and that's exactly how it's written, of Q and P. 27 says define a variable and write an expression. So it says the quotient of quotient. There's that word that means divide. That's that math word that means divide. Of 6 times a number and 16. So 6 times a number. That's something that you don't know. A number, that's what it means by define a variable, x. 6 times x, 6 times a number, and then do the quotient of that, which means to divide that by 16. And there's your algebraic expression. 28 is a whole lot easier. We know what this means, minus. That means to subtract. So 4 minus, again, a number. You can use any number you want. A lot of times people will use the letter n, but x is a very common one. 4 minus x. 29 says the total cost to rent a rowboat. Total cost to rent a rowboat is 18 times the number of hours the boat is used. So the number of hours, that's what we don't know. So 18 times the number of hours. You can use h, I just used x. It says write an equation to show this situation. Okay, and it does say to use h at the bottom. I got ahead of myself. It says write an equation to show if the total cost is C, so C equals 18 times the number of hours. So 18 times H, or C equals simply 18H. This is a very simple equation that we wrote. Number 30 says an equilateral triangle has 3 sides of equal length. So if you didn't know what an equilateral triangle is, that's what it is right there. 3 sides of equal length. So you have a picture that looks like this, where all 3 of these, that symbol means they have the same length. It says what's an equation for the perimeter of an equilateral triangle, where P is the perimeter. There we go. P is the perimeter, and S is the length of a side. So your perimeter, remember, perimeter just means this side plus this side plus this side. But if they're all exactly the same length, then you could do 3 times S, or simply 3S. Just like for a square, you can do 4 times S, whatever that side happens to be. 31 says evaluate U plus XY when they give you these values. U's value is 18, so U, which is 18, plus, and then in place of X, we got 10, and then it says it's right next to Y, which means times, so in place of Y is going to be 8. Now, order of operations we hadn't talked about yet, but you have to multiply. This isn't the first time y'all heard order of operations. Oh, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. You have to multiply before you add. 10 times 8, you do that first to get 80 plus 18. And when you add 18 and 80, you get 98. Number 32 says a pair of shoes costs $52.99. The state sales tax is 8%. Use the formula cost equals the price plus the rate times the price to find the total cost. Okay, so our cost is what we don't know. The price is, this is what it says, it costs $52.99. So $52.99 plus the rate, our rate is 8%. Remember, when you're talking about something being a percent, you're going to multiply it by it, but you can't multiply it simply by 8. You have to change 8 and move the decimal 1 time, 2 times. So it's going to be 0.08 in place of the rate. and then it's going to be times 52.99. So again, you do your multiplication first. You do 0.08 times 52.99. When you put these two together, you get 4.2392, and then you add that to 52.99 before you do any rounding at the end, because you know you're not going to go past the second digit in, especially when you're talking about money, and your cost is going to be a total of $57, and then it's going to say 2292. Again, we know we can only go to this third digit, this second digit, and we're going to look at the third one to determine if we round up or not. So the cost is going to be 57.23, $57.23. Then the last one says to evaluate the expression AB squared. And again, you guys did a little of this yesterday when I wasn't here in only my fifth period. But this will give you a little heads up on what's to come next week. When A's value is 4 times B's value is 3, so 4 times 3, and then square it. We know 4 times 3 is 12, and 12 squared means 12 times 12, which is 144. 5 minutes to make the video.